people in the audience that are here live with us at Wisconsin Avenue Park, and also virtually online in the interwebs. Welcome to our first RampUp Universal Park entitled My Uncle Was a Paralympian. I'm really excited to share with you guys today this opportunity, partnership that RampUp Milwaukee has become with the county parks. And Damian, Buchman, the founder of the Ability Center, kind of the visionary behind all of this. But we couldn't make it possible without you in the audience and the supporters and these two gentlemen that are with me today. So what we're going to do today, we'll walk around the park at some point to show you what some of our plan is. But not only that, we're going to just talk about why this mission is important to Guy, to Matt, when they got involved, to me, and what it means. So we welcome the crowd that is here to come on in, participate with us in this conversation from the audience, if you will, and you have any questions. You guys are going to be walking with us too, but in the meantime, I'm going to turn it over to the gentleman who came up with the concept that started as a universal beach party, Matt Sabljak. We met approximately
6 years ago
now.
Yeah, 6 years ago.
And you came on board right away, right? There was no hesitation, and I'm curious to hear, why. What is it that spoke to you, or did it take time in order for you to understand the importance and value of the Ability Center's mission?
Yeah, certainly. I think that one, never having looked at the world through the lens that you presented, which is, yes, we have the ADA and we have certain things in place in our built environments and in our buildings to make them accessible to people with disabilities, but then coming to understand really that so much of our structures and our playgrounds and the places that I had grown up as an athlete and just in this great city of parks being active were never accessible to a large chunk of people that were around me. Just that whole new lens. Two, your overall personal passion and commitment story, and I think everybody that's familiar with the Ability Center knows what you've gone through, and that sort of being an impossible 1 in a billion survivor, I found was incredible. And then three, it was around a time that my own, I had never considered this idea of temporarily disabled, and my mom was going through a kind of a nightmare knee replacement where she'd been in and out 6 or 7 times, and I had finally some firsthand experience with what it was like to try to help someone navigate the world in a wheelchair, and it just kind of like those three things together, it all clicked and really ignited my passion for this. And of course, I lead a marketing agency, and it's our job to recognize and tell great stories, and I felt like it's already a great story, and a great story that was going to.
Yeah, and as I think about our process too in that space, you brought up the idea of being, that we talk about a lot, being temporarily able-bodied. Mm-hmm. And if people don't understand that, we talk about everybody belongs to one particular group, and that's TAPS, and it stands for this idea of being temporarily able-bodied. And whether it's disease or accident or the old age, and if you can see, right, my Franken knees, as my sister would call them, this is the result of 23 knee replacements and revisions since I was a kid. So at 13 years old, sincerely overnight, I went from being an able-bodied athlete to being on crutches and in a knee immobilizer. And so any of us can be that in that space at any time. So we dream up this idea. You come to me with this idea of, let's throw a universal beach party. Take me back to that moment of where that concept kind of generated from, and who we were going to approach on this.
Yeah, the idea, and I have to give credit to my team at the agency, my partners Sam and Kurt and Chris and Kyle and others that were at the agency at the time, and many still are. The idea was, the challenge you had come to us with is we need to generally inform the community that this problem exists. Like the first step in getting widespread awareness and a movement started is to convince the world that there's a problem. And well, let's do an event. Let's do an event at the beach. It's summertime. We can get a lot of engagement. There's already a lot of people here. And let's do it at Bradford Beach, and let's highlight the challenge that Bradford Beach presents, which is, this is one of Milwaukee's jewels. I think most people see a picture of it, and if they've never been to Milwaukee, would never believe that it's Milwaukee, especially when it's bustling in summer. And we wanted to do it in a place where we felt like we could highlight, well, here's the problem on display. You've got an amazing beach and hundreds or thousands of people there, but there are thousands, tens of thousands of Milwaukeeans who might not ever be able to enjoy this. And that evolved into, well, instead of just showing the problem, what if we could temporarily kind of present the solution to it too? What if we could set up a prototype of what it would be like to make the beach accessible for anyone, for people with physical disabilities and other kinds of disabilities? And then, you know, I know that I remember the moment of taking it to the Parks Department and going, well, we've got to partner with the parks on this, and that has its own sort of magical story to it.
It does. And on that note, let's kind of turn it over to our other guest, Guy Smith. I think I'm always transparent. I always tell it like it is, and I'm going to continue to do that today. But the amazing thing is that Matt and the SRH team and I walked out of the office as it was presented, saying, wow, that went really good. I think we expected a middle finger, and we didn't get that, right? And so that was tremendously surprising and absolutely incredible. And now we walked out of the office and we're like, oh boy, we got to do this thing.
Yeah.
It just is the exact way that this whole thing got set up too. Just randomly, I'm going to do this, and here we are. So Guy, you were the chief operating officer at the time. Tell us what you heard and why it was important for you at the parks to get involved in this mission.
Thank you, Damian. So really, it was an amazing presentation when you guys came into the office, and I've been with the Parks Department for over 16 years now, and I realized, and I've realized during my tenure here, things that we need to do to improve. And accessibility is definitely one of those things. And one of our friends and colleagues that you know very well, Tim Okanowski, who was with the county for 35 years, he was the head of Office for Persons with Disabilities, had a really unique connection to Bradford Beach that I didn't realize until we actually went through this process. I had known Tim for a long time. And so Tim has always been great about showing us what's accessible, what's not accessible, how do we make things better. But when you came to us with the story about your friend that wasn't able to access the beach, it really struck me because, as you said, we're all temporary able-bodied. You know, I think about my father who was, you know, very strong for many, many years and now is primarily in a wheelchair. And you think about things in a lens in a different way. And when you approached us, I was like, we need to do something. I absolutely agree. Didn't know what we were going to do necessarily, and it took us a little bit to figure that out. But one of the things that that Damian and I talked about early on in the process is, you know, why do I care about accessibility? Well, you know, one of the things that I learned early on is my uncle Dana Jaster. He's a Paralympian. He actually was an athlete in the 1992 Barcelona Games, and also a medal winner. Actually, at the time, he had the record. He received a bronze medal and also a silver medal. He was in the high jump and also in the 4x1 relay. And I always was inspired by him. He was born without an arm, but you would never know it. He didn't use a prosthetic. He just was doubly strong in that other arm. And what was great about it is it encouraged me to get out, and I ran cross country and track all through middle school, high school, college. I ran marathons. And it was funny, when he and his family moved here from California, he hated distance running. And I kind of made him do it because it was my thing. I wasn't a sprinter. But through that relationship, he really inspired me to go above and beyond. And it made me just so amazed how many people he affected positively, where he recruited people for other Paralympic Games. where he recruited and coached other able-bodied into sports, became a teacher. So I use that story because it just shows like we all come from different personal backgrounds, but we need to look through a lens of of something that maybe we haven't experienced. And having seen you, having seen my uncle, having seen my dad and others persevere and continue is just amazing. And so that's why I just was like, this is the right time for us to do this. And as you know, this is just the beginning.
It's absolutely the beginning, and now you guys know where the title comes from of today's event. A surprise that even many of your staff, as I brought it up, didn't know that you had an uncle that was a Paralympian. And so you lived it, you experienced it, you've seen the capabilities. We often talk about this idea of access versus opportunity, right? And access to me means you can get in the door. But what a lot of people aren't thinking about is what's the opportunity once you're there, right? What's the opportunity once you come into a park? And in, again, the spirit of transparency, this is, how old is our park system?
Officially 1907, the parks were formed in Milwaukee County.
And here we are in Wisconsin Avenue Park, and this used to be a regional office building for you guys where we're hosting our office now, and maybe hasn't been occupied for roughly
At least 2 decades.
At least 2 decades, right? So the idea of the ADA was not even really here, but then our thought process too tends to not be in a space of able-bodied people can do this, right? We often think in that space of can't versus can do. And what's amazing for those who haven't seen it out there is that there's people in wheelchairs doing backflips in skate parks, right? They're going off ramps at Nitro Circus. Insane things when given and presented the opportunity when society doesn't hold them back. And so I know that me personally as a father as well, I want to always continue to play with my kids. And I think for me, for John in the audience, we have Anna and Ivy here today. It's important that they are provided the opportunities in these spaces to be able to play with friends and family.
Yeah, I'd say that was a an epiphany to me as well. Was I had thought of the world as more of like, well, if you have a disability, this affects you. There's a barrier for your interaction or your play or whatever it is. And one thing, Damian, that this experience and you have helped me realize is that, well, actually it affects your whole family and your friend groups, because if you're barricaded or unable to access someplace, then you can never play with your family together. If you're only able to, and I think I told you this early on, another experience I had was just getting the opportunity to play wheelchair basketball 10 or 15 years ago, because I was at the YMCA and they were short some players and they had extra wheelchairs and they were just like, anybody can come and play. And really, I was just playing basketball in a wheelchair, right? Like
we call it a different pair of shoes.
Right, in a different pair of shoes.
Yep.
And it was an unbelievable experience. And to think that as much fun and the memories I have of like playing with my brother and my parents, that never would have been possible because we never would have had a way to all play together is kind of a heartbreaking situation.
It is. And I mean, I consider the three of us visionaries, right? Matt, when you first brought this up, our big thing is that often organizations, and it's great that there's some opportunity, but often organizations have a model of we're organization A, we're going to bring equipment B to location C on date D. And if you can make it, that's great. And if you can't, we'll see you next week, next month, next year, whenever we host this thing again. And our mission is about a daily opportunity to be fit, active, healthy, and to play. And so when the idea came with the beach, to have a universal beach party, I quickly said, that's really good. I like this idea, but what I don't like is that we would leave the beach that day and it won't be accessible.
Yeah.
And so we changed that by just placing beach chairs at the beach. So Matt had this really great vision, this really great idea about how this can speak to the able-bodied public, conceptually. But to the visionary point, Guy, one of the things I've applauded the parks on, what I was illuminating here earlier, is that it's not your fault that the parks isn't accessible, but it's important to you that it becomes accessible and inclusive, and that everybody can play together, and we can create that kind of magic, right? But what I love is that, and I'm hoping you can speak to this a little, because this is what I've always said, but never really talked directly to you about it, is that you guys took the risk, right? So many people won't take the risk on people with disabilities because they're afraid of the liability, right? They're afraid of being sued. We can't do that because, and they just come up with all excuses. Or there's a lot of excuses like, well, we can't do that because we're not going to be able to serve everybody, so maybe we shouldn't serve anybody. And a lot of times, and I think we're already seeing it at the beach, a lot of places aren't accessible because they say, well, I don't have anybody with a disability that comes here. Well, yeah, that's because you're not accessible. So of course you don't have people with disabilities coming here because they can't get in, right? So why were you willing to take the risk without all the answers and move forward? Because that's a visionary thing to me, and I think that you're right there, which is why it's so incredible that at this time you are now the parks director.
Well, Damian, I think what really helped bring it home for me was actually realizing how many people within the Milwaukee County community have disabilities, but also recognizing that Milwaukee County and Milwaukee County Parks is a regional destination. That means that there's people from within the state, within Illinois, within other areas, where it just really dawned on me that your point about, well, there's no one here with disabilities, well, it's because it's not accessible. And I think what really stuck with me was once we did the beach chairs, but then we expanded to the ice sleds, both at Red Arrow and Wilson Ice Rink, and then the hand cycles that we did at Veterans Park, people were using them, and that people were coming with their families. And the thing that also changed, it was a paradigm shift for me, was about playgrounds. So I had been involved in my operational position prior to the Parks Director in helping with maintaining playgrounds and all of that. And ADA was always in my mind, but it wasn't thinking about how grandma and grandpa, or mom and dad, or my brother, or whomever is all able to interact together. That was like a huge shift in my thinking, where it's like, duh, why didn't I think of that before? But that's really important, and that's why I think we're here today at Wisconsin Avenue Park to really think through that, where everyone can play, everybody can play, and it's not like alienating someone that's disabled or able-bodied. It's like integrating that together. So I think having that shift in mindset, and then having a parks team that got, they get it, and working with you hand in hand, it just makes sense. And I think that the community's embraced it. And we would get letters at the Parks Department saying, hey, I was able to go ice skating for the first time because we had these sleds. And it's like, wow, that's pretty powerful. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
And I had a similar experience at the first Bradford event. There was a guy there who rolled up and just said to me, I have been driving by this beach my whole life. And it was a guy in a wheelchair, and said, 30, 40 years I've been driving by this beach. This is the first time I've ever been able to roll onto the beach and throw a beach ball back to a pretty girl. Like, it was like amazing, right? Like,
yeah,
it was. You and I have like choked up on that one, time and again, and I too want to applaud the parks for stepping up to the challenge. And I remember, and I think we're proud to say, put that challenge out there right now of Bradford Beach is now the most accessible beach in the United States. And we're not putting it out there. We hope that someone will prove us wrong, right? We hope that there's a beach out there that's doing even more to be inclusive. And I go back to something that I heard Chris Abley say 8-10 years ago, as he sort of stump speech for Milwaukee Film, which is we have to break out of this mindset in Milwaukee that we can only do things that are Milwaukee good or Wisconsin good.
Yeah.
Why not shoot for the best? There's nothing stopping us. And I think it's amazing that what we're what we've already done in a small park and are looking to do in a much more ambitious way is to just have the most accessible park system in the world. Like, it's possible to do it here in Milwaukee. And the last part I would add to that is, and we were talking about this as I came in, there was an amazing moment a half an hour ago. The Milwaukee Bucks were the first team ever to forfeit an NBA playoff game to call attention to a social justice issue, right? Like, which is like, holy cow. We can do it from Milwaukee. We don't need permission. We don't need to be New York. I think it's an amazing moment in our country and in our world right now to be doing something like this.
Yeah, I mean, it's a time when everybody's really understanding needs, you know, in masses. And certainly our movement, this RampUp movement, has been accepted. You put it well. Our goal as an organization, we laid our goal out to make Greater Milwaukee the most universally inclusive recreation destination in the country. And let's get onto the park a little bit. Talk about why we're doing what we're doing. We've talked about the fact that there are certainly inclusive playgrounds, right, around our community, whether in local city parks throughout the county, or maybe even a county park has 1 or 2 accessible playgrounds. But we're sitting in a 17-acre park, right? And inside the 17-acre park, there's baseball fields, there's bathrooms, there's the playground. We have other elements we want to add. But the concept here is about thinking bigger and not just being that thinking a playground is enough. And what we do is we drop a playground inside of this 17-acre park, and we're saying, here, this is where you guys can play. Forget about the rest of it. And Guy, you mentioned, you know, the idea of grandparents. We're right across the street from St. Camilla's here, right? We chose this park in part because we are just over the highway to the Milwaukee Regional Medical Center, with Children's Hospital, with Freighter Hospital, and with the Ronald McDonald House. And all of them using this space would make a lot of sense. And we're also not too far from the VA. So we're in a really great central spot that people can come and experience this park, also a block away from the zoo, and be a regional destination. And so if you guys would join me, I would love to just show the audience here a little bit about what we're talking about and what we're doing. And we're going to explore more with you guys, with the audience, and anybody here in the next week, 6 weeks, we'll have other guests. But for now, let's take a look at what we're talking about here in Wisconsin Avenue Park and what's missing. And Guy, by no means is this about telling the county parks that you haven't done a good enough job. You've stepped up to the plate. One of the first things everybody needs to do is accept the problem, admit the problem, and be ready to fix it. And we're going to have to do that as a community, right? The parks is, I think our entire community's understanding is that your budget often falls short. And if we're going to do this and we're going to deliver this to Milwaukee, and if Milwaukee's going to be #1 and hold that trophy on the top of the mountain of universal access and inclusion, then we're going to need everybody to get behind it. So are you guys in for taking a walk and showing them a little bit?
Yes, please.
All right, let's do it. To those here in the audience, I hope, do we have the map that we can share with everybody? So right now we're standing on the, and here's, everybody say hi. Say hi.
Hi.
People actually showed up, internets, which is fantastic. These are people who care about inclusion, including our board member, John Haupt, here, who just dove into Lake Michigan for the first time in 20 years. I've got my sister in the background as well, Chelsea. I have a niece and nephew on the autism spectrum, so full inclusion with all disabilities are important to me. My wife, Bo, who works at Children's Hospital and works with kids with cancer, which we often see disabilities result from. Guy's wife is in the audience. Mary Beth Budish is here from our advisory board, and Pam? Pam, nice to meet you. You guys walk with us too, all right? We in? All right, let's take a look at the baseball field real quick and talk a little bit about it. You guys will get maps, and we'll probably show you guys just kind of a close-up of what the map is that we're talking about too. Guy, when it comes to the baseball field here, one of the things that we're really big on is that I don't want to displace the able-bodied public from those with disability. So you've got 3 fields here. Who's primarily using these fields in a non-COVID environment?
Well, typically we have little leagues out here from TOSA. We have softball that's going on out here as well. And normally these fields would be packed and busy and all of that. And as Damian and I talked early on, it's all about inclusivity. So we're going to make sure that the existing users are able to still utilize this space, but also hand in hand have folks that are not able-bodied. And so that's the whole beauty of this, is that we're enhancing so that everyone can use this.
Right. So one of the things, I had the TOSA baseball league here, and we had a chat about this space. And I don't want to take away the able-bodied kids' opportunities by any means, but one of the things that we're planning in this space is actually for this field to become what I call a universal field. It's never been done before. There are things such as miracle fields that exist around our area, that exist around the country. It's a nationwide thing, but that misses an opportunity for kids in wheelchairs and adults in wheelchairs to actually be able to play on those fields. So we're going to turn this field as our goal into a universal baseball field. Again, never been done before. But we also thought, well, if we're going to displace some hours of people's practice, they can certainly do pitching, batting, and all of that stuff on the universal field. It's for everybody, just like everything we do. But we talked about floodlights in the park. More hours of play can happen so we don't displace anybody.
Absolutely, and one of the things that you'll see in our park system is we have some great ball diamonds and all of that, but we have very few lighted fields. So this would be a really great opportunity for everyone. And like you said, Damian, you just are able to maximize so many more hours in the day than what we currently are able to do.
So universal baseball field, Milwaukee Brewers, I'm not sure if you're listening, but maybe this is something you want to help fund for everybody? We'll talk. Let's move on a little bit. Again, 3 baseball fields, universal field. Our audience has got the map. If you get a chance, take a shot of that map as we're walking so the audience can see it. So again, we're in a 17-acre park. We're going to head to the playground. Before we hit the playground, though, excellent. Before we hit the playground, let's talk about this building. Matt, did you play baseball growing up?
I did not have the patience.
I did not have the patience either. I didn't bat well, but I ran fast before I had metal knees.
I have a brother with AE, capital HD, you know? And so as brothers, we were sort of tied to the hip playing the same sports. And he made it about 2 weeks in a baseball league, and that was it. I ran from the outfield into the stands, and it was over.
I made it one game as I subbed in, pinched hit for a friend as an 11-year-old in Little League. So, Guy, an approximation of when this building was constructed?
Well, you kind of put me on the spot there, Damian, but I would say that this building's at least 50 years old, and it was a regional office. Back in the day, we had 1,300 full-time employees. We're now at 240. So you can tell that things have shrunk, and our system continues to get bigger. So as you mentioned, our budget is a big challenge. It's a challenge in 2020, and it's going to be equally, if not worse, in 2021. And that's why partnerships with you and others are so important. What I'm happy about, though, is with this building, we're breathing new life into it in the fact that we have you and your organization here as well as the park people. And that's what we need, is we need those partnerships. But as you can tell, this building is not ADA compliant. And it's not just the compliance component, it's the fact, is it usable? Is it functional the way that we need it to be? So as the discussion has continued, we realize that we're going to have great ball diamonds here. We're going to have a fantastic playground here. But we're also going to need to have restroom facilities and other support facilities. We're going to need things improved in the parking lot. So we need to make sure, and we are, thinking about the fact that when we do these things, we're thinking holistically so that when people come here, they're able to fully enjoy themselves and experience it.
And that's the kind of stuff we're talking about. I talked about at the beach how the accessibility at the beach is more about what it isn't than what it is. And let's be honest, going to the bathroom is the most basic thing that everybody needs to do. And people should not have to go home or leave what they're doing in order to just use a restroom. And so it's going to be really important that we either create a new building or create a new outbuilding for bathrooms and caretaker rooms and those kind of things so that people can enjoy the experience as long as they want at the park. And it sounds so basic and so simple, but so incredibly important. It's always important that everybody feels welcome, wanted, and comfortable in everything they do, right? I think I say that a lot is again, I talked about access versus opportunity before, and I can get in the door, but when I'm there, do I have the full opportunity that everybody else has? And if I can't use a bathroom, then I'm probably not even coming. So this is gonna be, while a very boring piece, one of the most important pieces of this entire project. Let's continue on to the playground. So the Parks has a great pathway here already. So there is some accessibility from a wheelchair standpoint. One of the great things about Bradford Beach that I don't think the public knows is that when we pick those beach chairs up that we've left down there for everybody to use, they're going to come to Wisconsin Avenue Park. And trail wheels, and they'll be able to access the entire park in that accessible.
That's where the chairs will be in the off season, if you will.
They'll be at Memorial Day to Labor Day. The beach chairs are down at Bradford Beach, and then they'll become trail chairs. And in November, we'll be raising some dollars to also make those chairs into winter skis so that people can access the park.
One of the things we saw organically, sort of naturally happening as we did our event at Bradford Beach and at Red Arrow Park and at Veterans Park was structural changes we were making were getting used by people, right? People were pushing strollers on the ramps to take their kids up to the water.
Yep.
Like there's a lot of ancillary benefits to making structures more accessible that aren't just about people with disabilities, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you can go back to curb cuts on the sidewalks, right? Yep. Those were created for people with disabilities. We use them on our skateboards, on our bikes, on our scooters, with our kids, with strollers, everything. So often we say, if it works for somebody with a disability, it works for everybody. John, I'm gonna invite you for a second. Kay is bringing over wheelchair. I am not a daily wheelchair user, but there are days where I am in so much pain. The likelihood in my life of being a bilateral above knee amputee is high. It's surprising that I'm not yet. So I often think about, what does the world look like for me? And I know I'm gonna still wanna do all these things if I'm in a chair. And again, Guy, not to point out a lack of accessibility in your park, it's just the reality. And if we don't face the reality and show it and talk about it, we can't fix it, right? So let's turn our attention to the actual playground. And John, why don't you take a push for me, if you will, on this blue space.
In that chair?
No, in your chair. I'm gonna jump in my chair too, just kind of get perspective for everybody. So, we can see here that the Parks has attempted to make an accommodation with some poured rubber surface. But you'll notice throughout the rest of this playground, there's wood chips. And so if I want to push my chair, if I happen to be a user, this goes back to that conversation about access and opportunity. I can only go from this point here to 2 toddler swings across the playground, right? So let's take a walk in there. So like John was here with family members and wanted to play and participate, which is clearly not accessible. And he could get, again, to the toddler swings, and there's nothing else. We also have my friends here who are incredible. Can you guys come say hi for us? Come on over, come on over. Come on in. Do you want to introduce yourself?
No.
Come on. Who's gonna?
Yeah.
Anna. This is Anna and Ivy. And I'll tell you something, these are the Cosgroves, and I absolutely adore these girls because they are gonna make this playground work for them no matter what. But they've been coming to our open gyms when we were able to host those pre-COVID days, right? And always bringing a new family, new friends to play in a different pair of shoes and experience what they can do and what they're capable of doing with them in the same way and in a different pair of shoes. And I asked the girls to come and play today. What would it mean to you if you had full access to everything on the playground? It was easier to navigate. It was built with ramps and slides and swings that are easier to get on or use. Would you be more likely to play with friends, do you think? Maybe? Yeah? Is that the kind of, if you were able to experience a universally inclusive park, do you think you would have the opportunity to play with more of your friends.
Mhm.
Yeah. And what about, like, would you host like a birthday party here? Do you
Maybe
think in the
not.
park? Maybe not. Why not?
Because maybe I go somewhere else.
Maybe you go somewhere else, not to the park for a birthday party? When is your birthday?
January 3rd.
Oh, that's in the dead of winter. That's a bummer. We're not usually open in the park in the winter, are we? Or do you play in the park in the winter?
Not really.
Not really. Anna, what about you? When's your birthday?
Got names mixed up.
Oh, I'm sorry. When's your birthday?
Same as him.
Same? Okay. So one of the things I've talked about and thought about in this space is that you see a lot of kids hosting birthday parties in bounce houses, right? And not everybody can access that. So how cool would it be for kids and families to be able to have and host a birthday party in a space that's 100% inclusive and accessible from all kinds of disability, whether we're talking intellectual developmental disabilities and sensory issues, or we're talking physical disabilities. And so to be able to provide that opportunity where everybody can play, I think is just really important for us. Anything that you can add, John, in the space of what you think this would mean for our community?
Well,
Introduce yourself a little bit.
my name is John Haupt, and I'm a board member for the Ability Center. And you know, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said when you talked about a facility not seeing disabled people, visitors, and so forth. And the reason is that it's not because it's not accessible. I mean, I've been using a wheelchair for close to 10 years now, and I know a heck of a lot of people in my situation, and I had no idea they were out there before, you know. And as I learned to do things like wheelchair basketball, and hand cycling, and so on and so forth, I find that there's a lot of people out there who don't ever try it, and the reason they don't try it because the opportunity is not available to them. And the more, and I've brought a lot of people into hand cycling and so forth, and once they get the opportunity, you know, it opens up a whole new world.
Sky's the limit.
Right.
You feel welcome, wanted, and comfortable when you're given an equal opportunity that everybody else has, right?
And that's what I was going to say.
Yep. They're already headed down the slide. We missed that. They're like, forget about it. I don't need to be a part of this. That's fine. So we want to open it up, you know, for questions a little bit. Why don't we head back over to the park benches here? If anybody in the interwebs out there has a question about what we're doing, I will grab a map and be able to point out some of the stuff that we're talking about as well. Thank you, Chelsea. So we're in the middle of the park where the playgrounds are now, and eventually this is supposed to be fitness. So we have outdoor fitness stations that are multi-generational and again accessible for everybody, and the actual playground would go behind the building. And we're looking at a $7 million project because it's an entire park, not just a playground. And it's going to include the wooded area trails so that everybody can get out there. We're going to talk about this trail system next week with Hoppy Tree Service and the park's arborist, because nature is important to us as well, and we don't want to impact that. But if there are any questions, either from my audience here or the audience out there, I think we have some people monitoring with you guys on YouTube and on Facebook, whether or not you have questions or input. What are the things you'd like to see here? We want to invite the community. We don't pretend to have all the answers, and we want to make sure that we include everybody in the design, development, and actual execution of this park. Has there been any comments out there, Kay? Okay.
Well, one of the things that we haven't talked about yet is the sort of the ultimate destination of the Ability Center, right? Which is, we're talking about how to adapt the park system and make it more accessible and more universally inclusive. maybe share a little bit about the original inspiration, right? When we got together, we weren't talking about parks, we weren't talking about changing the built environment, we were talking about building a destination, building a center, and maybe it would probably be valuable to share a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, you're right on the money, Matt. So this vision originally for us in the Ability Center started as an organization that was going to do sports, adaptive sports for people with physical disabilities. What we found and came up against is that nothing was accessible, or the spaces weren't available, or they weren't affordable for us to use. More often than not, it was all of those things, right? And it was a combination that wouldn't allow us. And if they did, it was going to be that time when no one else is there, right? You can have 2 to 4 on a Tuesday afternoon, but we can't guarantee that in the next session. So we immediately said, we're not going to give up on our mission. I mean, in case people can't tell, quit is not in my vocabulary. So instead of giving up, we said, well, we're going to have to build our own facility. We're going to have to design our own space that can be open for everybody. And so, yeah, what Matt's alluding to is we envisioned an actual complex that we deemed called the Ability Center that would be a sports tourism venue, that would be a membership space, because again, it's not the disability that's often the problem, it's the lack of opportunity that causes heart disease, diabetes, obesity, all these things that are preventable. I actually thought that we would have built that 10 years ago when it started, and that this effect that we're having right now was going to be a ripple effect of what happened inside of those 4 walls. And it's kind of like what you said about Chris Abley in his comment earlier, right? We need to be bigger than is just good enough for Milwaukee, right? We need to be the leader, and we arguably, and as kind of sad as it is for me to say that, we may have achieved our goal, right, of being the most universally inclusive recreation destination in the country by simply doing the 3 ramp-ups that we've done with the beach and with Veterans Park and with Red Arrow Park and ice skating. And that's great, but also sad, right? That all it took was some equipment and a ramp to make opportunities more inclusive for everybody. And by no means do I think we should stop there, and will we stop there. We'll execute this park, we'll execute hopefully more parks, we'll execute the Ability Center, and we'll have more opportunity for everybody to be fit, active, healthy, and to play.
And there was a question from the audience, which is Mary Beth Budish, who introduced us 6 years ago, wanted to know, like, for people out there who are watching or anybody else, like, how do they get involved? What do you need right now in terms of like people who want to help out with this mission?
Yep. We need everybody to tell the story, right, and get it, and we need people to contribute more than anything. These are Tim Okanowski, who you alluded to earlier, said when he said, I'm sure Damian's got something else up his sleeve and something is next. So I leaned in and said, yep, that's the Universal Park. And he said, like Damian said, it's gonna be expensive. And it's gonna be expensive because people with disabilities deserve those opportunities to play together. So it's gonna be a $7 million project. And we're inviting local philanthropy from obviously foundations to corporations to get involved and create a park that's Milwaukee proud, right? That represents everything that we are, everything that we should be, and everything that we can be. I know on the screen there's a text to donate option for people to give if they want to, and we're launching a campaign that is available now through our website at tacwi.org, and we'll be coming out trying to get people involved. I wish I could say that we had a whole lot of opportunities to actually participate, but in this COVID environment right now that we're in, gyms are closed, right? But the outdoors are open, but they're not open for everybody. I think that we're demonstrating that. I hope people are seeing that. I hope people are understanding that just because the outdoors are open and we're encouraged to go there, as you said in your dispatch, Matt, that doesn't mean that everybody can access those. And that's the story we're trying to tell, and that's the opportunity we're looking for people to be a part of.
Cool.
And one thing that, Damian, you probably don't know yet, but I had spoken with Supervisor Rowland, who is the new supervisor for this area, and we are going to be setting up a meeting where you and I are going to be discussing this project because he has interest, he wants to make sure that the residents and the voters in his district are aware of it to try to get them involved. But I also want to point out that our parks are not just local, they're regional. So we encourage the greater Milwaukee area and others for people to get really involved. And with donors, any little bit really helps. But I know that with the new supervisor in the area and the former supervisor that retired, Luigi Schmidt, also super supportive. So we really have a lot of momentum behind us. So I just want to make sure that people are really aware of that.
Yeah, by no means are we starting from ground zero. We've had great partners that are a part of this. You guys will get to meet them in the coming weeks. Game time and Hoppy Tree Service next week. St. Camillus is going to be joining us to talk about how much grandparents rock and how they want to play together. Mary Beth, who's here, is a grandparent, and I'm sure she loves to and will always love to and want to continue to play with her grandchildren, right? Grandparents are not the grandparents of yesteryear where they would just sit on the park benches. They want to play, and they should be able to play. And parents with disabilities should be able to play. When we think about a park, I'm sure the park system, right? You guys are never just thinking about the kids, right? Because all generations are accessing the park. All generations want to play. It's good physically, it's good mentally, but not everybody has the opportunity, but we're changing. Any questions out here? I'm gonna actually pull my sister over here. I'm gonna force her to come and say a couple.
Oh, this is my favorite portion of the
Yeah.
show. You, passerby,
Yes.
come here.
Come here. Hi, Chelsea.
Hi, brother.
This is my big sister. She taught me how to do everything. She taught me how to tie my shoes. She taught me my ABCs. She even, I could cry.
Yeah,
She
don't
even
start.
changed my bed when I was on chemotherapy and wet the bed in the middle of the night. My sister was there when I was 13 years old to come and change the bed. So she's always been there. But we've got Justice and Noel.
Yeah.
You are a leader in the autism space, in the spectrum. What are the kind of things you would want to see for that to be right?
Yeah, so I think about the experience that I had raising my own kids on the spectrum, and they're grown up now, all grown up. But when they were this age, they would love nothing more than to see a buddy bench kind of a thing. If I don't have anyone to play with, and I see all these other groups of kids playing with one another, and I have no idea how to initiate that interaction socially, I want to make sure that somewhere there's a bench, and this is happening increasingly in schools. I love that Boy Scout and Girl Scout troops are installing buddy benches. But if you're feeling lonely and if you're feeling like you don't fit in, and certainly this could be something that could be accessible for someone who is in a chair, go to the buddy bench and wait for someone to come and invite you to play. You might not be really great at initiating that interaction, but it doesn't mean you don't want to. I think what my son did that was the most fun thing for him at a place like this is he would run up to another kid on the playground and just tap them on the shoulder and say, "You're it," and had no idea how that reciprocation worked. So once they tagged him, then the expectation would be that he would chase back after them, and that's not what would happen. So I would love to just have a place, because kids are so willing to play with one another regardless of our abilities, regardless of our differences. I think what's universal and inclusive about all children is they love play. So I think the more ways that we can make a space like this inclusive for those who struggle with communication or mobility or social interaction, that would be great.
I would imagine that the sensory input could sometimes be too much on the noise and the activity that's happening on a playground. What do you think it would mean to have trails throughout the rest of the acreage here that they could escape to? And would, coming to my mind, and this is why we're inviting people to join us and give us their input so that we can think more and think further. It seems to me that it would be a good idea to have buddy benches throughout the trail where it might be quieter. Would that make sense?
That would make sense. I think about how sometimes an environment like this can be so exciting that it is too much, and you need to kind of retreat for a little bit to a quiet space. Doesn't mean you can't recover from that, all of that sensory input, and come back and rejoin the space. But especially if a kiddo hasn't learned to really master all of that expression of emotion, they don't want to have what we call a meltdown. They don't want to kind of lose control of their emotional regulation in front of all of these new friends they just met. So having a space where you can go to, a dignified space where you can kind of decompress, recollect yourself, and rejoin a group, a play opportunity would be really nice. And of course, for a lot of kids on the spectrum, anything that spins is a great kind of a sensory stimmy thing to be able to do. Spinning objects is often a very calming thing, something that's visual and tactile. There are some tactile things here that could be really neat for someone on the spectrum to be able to use to, again, just kind of regulate themselves, get their thoughts lined up with the rest of their body. So I think that'd be great.
Last thing, Chelsea, we're brother, sister, we're baby and eldest in the family. We both founded organizations. We do the work. We don't just say, I've got this idea and someone else, please lead it and take it over. Clearly you guys can hear that she's the educated one in the family and much, much more intelligent with a much broader vocabulary than I have. But I think, what I want you to do is just explain to everybody what it is that you guys do in the organization that you started and why just within my own family we have unbelievable resources to see something like this come together.
So I started an organization with another autism mom. It's called Good Friend Inc. We started it 13 years ago. And the reason we started this organization that was all about autism awareness, acceptance, and empathy is because we were noticing in our own kiddos that they had this whole classroom of kids around them who weren't quite sure how to interact with them, and our kids weren't quite sure how to interact with their classmates. And so as I helped out in my son's kindergarten class, there was this precious little boy, Charlie, who kept coming and asking me questions. And this was in a time where you would have kids together kind of in a pod of tables, and he would take the answers that I gave him and go and deliver those back to the kids that were sitting with him at the tables. And I realized that these weren't just Charlie's questions. These were questions that all of the kids in that class had, but Charlie was the only one brave enough to ask. And when he went back and shared that information with the rest of the kids in the class or the rest of the kids at that table group, they were better able to interact with Justice. So this was Justice at 5 years old. Now Justice is 21 years old and he has a job and he's a college student. And I need to make sure that his colleagues and that his classmates and his instructors know just as much about what makes him tick, even if when he's not as able to communicate that. So for all of the autistic adults out there who are able to self-advocate, that is awesome. And for all of you who need a little help getting us neurotypical people, us neuromajority people to get it, because we are often the more inflexible ones than you are, that's why Good Friend exists. We want to make sure that we have a community that appreciates neurodiversity. So that's our focus.
So it might be a benefit if they could all play together and understand one another, right? That would seem to make sense?
Yeah, that would totally
That would totally make
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
So last question, how many people with autism have you guys served? And how many people without autism has Good Friend served to date?
Deep questions. So if you think about autism being 1 in 54 people, you can probably do the math, because it's not like everyone we've ever talked to with autism has come and waved their hand and went, I'm on the spectrum, because we don't need them to do that. Some people have self-identified. We've probably been able to interact with at least 500, I'm guessing, people on the autism spectrum that we knew of directly, but we've impacted directly more than 53,000 people since we started in 2007, mostly through kindergarten through 8th grade schools, which has been great, but now in an era of COVID, just know that we care. We are so, we are very concerned about the social impact that this is having on kids who are neurodivergent, and we appreciate everything that everyone is trying to do in your communities. If you know your kiddo has a classmate who's neurodivergent, we really hope you figure out a way to reach out to them so that we can all stay connected, because that's super important.
And I think I'll close with this is one of the points I was getting at is that your guys' goal is not about serving the individual with autism, but teaching the typically developing students how to be a good friend to people with autism. And what I love about that, and what I know you and I could create here together, is that you've touched 53,000 kids. They've asked a lot of questions, I'm sure, over the years. They've written a lot of comments that, knowing you, you've probably saved every single one of them and have them somewhere. Probably logged in a database because you're more organized than I am. But that's stuff we can turn to make sure that we can implement some of those thoughts here on a large scale. I hope you'll work with us.
Love to.
All right. So everybody out there, Guy and Matt, do you guys have anything you want to share in closing?
Just that this is the next step in the journey, and we're super excited about it. We're looking for support from you out there to help us with this, but also that we have the bigger goal, as Matt and Damian have said, of making our park system the most universally accessible park system in the country, and also look for more things that come out of Damian's sleeve, because he's always got plans. So
Yeah.
He's got it, Mike.
Yeah, I think we're at a unprecedented moment in our country where we get to define what we the people really means, right? Like what those three words really stand for. And I think our argument and our mission is that we the people includes people of all ability levels on a physical plane, and let's keep doing it.
Yep, disability doesn't discriminate, right, by any means. So tune in 2 more weeks. We hope you'll join us again. I don't know how well this worked. I don't know how well this didn't work. Hopefully it's streamed to all of you and you guys had the opportunity to watch it. We'll do an additional talk back live and watch this in the future. But I hope you've learned something today. I hope you can get in a space of helping us and understanding why it's important that everybody play together. So tune in, new conversation, new people.